The crimson nebula stretched across the viewport like spilled blood against black velvet, its tendrils writhing with electromagnetic fury that had claimed 17 expedition ships in the past decade. Captain HFY, of the Vorthak High Command, studied the readings with 4 of his 6 eyes while the remaining pair watched the small human female seated at the navigation console. "This is madness," he chittered through his translator, his carapace shifting nervously. "The Red Storm has destroyed every vessel that dared enter its domain. The Kelrani lost their finest explorers. The silicon-based Nexari couldn't even get their quantum processors to function within a light year of its edge." Lieutenant Sarah Chen didn't look up from her calculations, her fingers dancing across holographic displays with practiced precision. The 26-year-old xenoarchaeologist had joined the Stellar Harmony expedition only 3 months ago, but she had already proven herself invaluable in deciphering ancient alien technologies. Now, as the only volunteer willing to navigate the notorious Red Storm, she represented their last hope of reaching the mysterious signals emanating from its center. "The Kelrani relied on bio-neural networks," Sarah said calmly, finally glancing at the towering insectoid captain. "The Nexari used quantum entanglement processors. Both systems are vulnerable to the storm's chronomagnetic distortions." She tapped her temple with a slight smile. "But human brains were beautifully analog." Commander Theiss, a serpentine, Sithak whose species had mastered faster-than-light travel when humans were still learning to make fire, slithered closer to the console. Her scaled head weaved hypnotically as she spoke. "Explain this analog advantage, human. Our species have studied the Red Storm's effects for centuries. The temporal fluctuations alone should scramble any organic neural patterns." Sarah pulled up a 3-dimensional model of the storm's structure, its scarlet spirals rotating slowly in the holographic projector. "Every other species in the galaxy evolved under stable stellar conditions. Your neural architectures are precise, efficient, optimized for predictable environments, but Earth?" She laughed, and the sound seemed almost musical compared to the mechanical translations of her crewmates. "Earth threw everything at us. Ice ages, volcanic winters, magnetic pole reversals, asteroid impacts, solar flares. We didn't just survive chaos, we evolved to thrive in it." The ship's sensors detected the first wisps of the storm's outer edge, and immediately the alien crew members began experiencing the predicted effects. Captain HFY's compound eyes began flickering erratically as his nervous system struggled to process the conflicting temporal signals. Commander Theiss coiled herself into a defensive posture, her heat-sensing organs overloaded by the storm's infrared anomalies. But Sarah remained steady at her console, her pupils dilating slightly, as she instinctively adapted to the shifting light patterns. Her heart rate increased, not from fear, but from the familiar rush of navigating uncertainty. This was what her species did best: improvise, adapt, overcome. "Neural flexibility," she murmured, more to herself than her increasingly distressed crewmates. "Humans have more random neural connections than any other known species. What you call inefficiency, we call redundancy. When the storm scrambles one neural pathway, we automatically route through another." The Stellar Harmony plunged deeper into the Red Storm, its hull creaking under the pressure of warped spacetime. The ship's AI began malfunctioning, its quantum cores unable to maintain coherence in the temporal flux. Emergency systems flickered on and off like dying stars. Through it all, Sarah navigated by instinct and intuition, skills that predated humanity's venture into space by millions of years. When the ship's sensors failed, she relied on the subtle gravitational tugs she could feel through the deck plating. When the communication systems went dead, she interpreted the storm's patterns like her ancestors had once read wind and weather. "How?" gasped Captain HFY, his translator crackling with static. "How are you still functioning?" Sarah's hands moved across manual controls, steering them through a gap in the storm's fury that existed for barely 3 seconds. "Because my grandmother was a sailor," she said simply, "and her grandmother survived the Dust Bowl, and her great-great-grandmother crossed the Atlantic in a wooden ship. navigating by stars when the instruments failed. The storm's intensity reached its peak, and for a moment, Sarah felt the full weight of the temporal distortions pressing against her consciousness. She experienced flashes of potential futures, echoes of distant pasts, the weight of collapsed timelines pressing against her skull. But instead of breaking under the pressure, her mind bent like a reed in a hurricane, flexible enough to survive what would shatter more rigid structures. And then, suddenly, they emerged into the eye of the storm. Before them hung the impossible, a space station of unknown origin, its crystalline structures pulsing with the same red energy as the storm itself. The signals they had detected grew stronger, revealing themselves to be a message in mathematical concepts so pure they transcended language barriers. "The precursors," whispered Commander Theiss, her voice filled with awe. "The first ones who seeded the galaxy with life." Sarah smiled as she maneuvered the ship toward the ancient station. "They've been waiting for someone who could reach them, someone whose species learned to dance with chaos instead of fighting it." As they docked with the precursor station, Sarah realized that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their weapons. It was their ability to find order within disorder, to navigate the impossible, and to survive what should have destroyed them. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations had failed because they were too perfect, too specialized. But humans, chaotic, adaptable, beautifully imperfect humans, had evolved in the crucible of a world that never let them grow comfortable. And in the end, that made all the difference.